Howdy folks, Jambareeqi here. A few years ago I did a video in which I ranked the Disney villains of the 90s, and a lot of you folks seem to enjoy that. So let's do another one. This time I'm going to be covering the Disney villains of the 2000s. A couple of rules before I begin so you all know what to expect. Keep in mind that Disney own a lot of animated properties. So to narrow things down, I'm only going to be counting villains from animated films produced by Disney's own animation studio. Secondly, some characters you might think will be included won't actually count, because they're technically not Disney villains and just antagonists in the story. I mean, I wouldn't put them in the same category as Jafar or Ursula. I also won't be counting the Firebird from Fantasia 2000 because he only appears right at the end in his own self-contained short. It would be unfair to compare him to all the other Disney villains on this list. With all that information out of the way, let's get ranking. Krone is the leader of the herd that's heading to the nesting grounds after a meteor shower in Dinosaur. He's a very aggressive iguanodon with a strong determination to retain his power, and enforce his belief that only the strong may survive. What makes him evil is his lack of remorse for the elderly or young he's willing to sacrifice, and how he sneers at the idea of protecting the disadvantaged, stubbornly refusing to find a solution to make sure that all the weaker dinosaurs have a fighting chance. Something that the film's hero, Aladar, later ends up proving as possible. He prioritizes his ego and privilege above political responsibility or compassion. Now, I do appreciate a Disney film that has a villain who is already in a role of power instead of planning to steal it, because it makes for a change of pace for the studio and skips over the predictable beats we expect to see. I also find it interesting that Krone has managed to drill his beliefs into his family and friends, to the point where they struggle to express empathy to others and have become convinced that you have to earn value for your life by proving your physical strength. This gives Krone a unique cult leader sort of role that's kind of eerie. However, what Krone lacks is personality and appeal. There's nothing exactly charismatic about him, he has no sense of humour, there's nothing witty or clever about his dialogue. He doesn't really get to do much besides bellow instructions at the herd, make commands to his right-hand dinosaur, Bruton, or yell at Aladar for questioning his authority. You could say he's menacing as a villain because he's rather bulked up for an iguanodon and has quite the intense temper. But once we meet the Carnotaurs, who are far more imposing in size and threat, Krone seems less scary in comparison. So what we're left with is a villain that doesn't offer that much. Krone certainly plays an important role in the film, resembling the wrong ideals for a leader to have, and being the perfect antagonist for a kind-hearted character like Aladar. But I have to admit that he's kind of boring? E tier. Eezmer is the royal advisor for the egotistical Emperor Kuzco, who really wishes she had the throne to herself, and her desire for Kuzco's power is so obvious that the Emperor fires her. In revenge, she works with her henchman Kronk to poison Kuzco at dinner, but Kronk accidentally turns the Emperor into a llama instead. There are so many things that I love about Eezmer. I really adore her as a character. For example, even before she gains any power, she tries to live life with style and glamour, being totally confident in herself in spite of her age. She's so damn fabulous, and her flamboyant personality matches her over-the-top attire. She embodies everything I love about campy Disney villains, while also finding a fun identity of her own.
I'll just poison him with this. Take it, Kronk. Feel the power.
Oh, I can feel it.
Our moment of triumph approaches! It's dinner time!
She's incredibly gifted as a potions maker too, combining science and magic to create powerful sorcery. So even though she wants to be seen as this classy woman, she's also not afraid to get her hands dirty and play around with messy, dangerous chemicals. Her dynamic with her henchman Kronk is one of the major strengths of this movie too, because her fierce aggression and hammy evilness hilariously contrasts against the laid-back and chipper Kronk. Plus her frustrations with her dopey minion's incompetence always results in comedy gold.
So, is everything ready for tonight?
Oh yeah, I thought we'd start off with soup and a light salad, and then see how we feel after that.
Not the dinner. You know.
Oh right, the poison for Kuzco. The poison chosen specially to kill Kuzco. Kuzco's poison.
Sure, she's yet another Disney villain who intends to steal a monarch's throne, something that had become a cliche for the studio by the 2000s. However, the film parodies this trope by turning it into a comedic farce. giving it a silly twist that we don't see coming, which inspires the movie's fantastic sense of humour. S tier. Commander Rook is in charge of leading the exploration into Atlantis, working with hero Milo's linguistic skills to get past obstacles in the crew's way. He acts like he's providing military support to the mission for educational and cultural reasons, but we later find out that he used Milo to steal treasure from Atlantis, which turns out to be its native people's life force. Now, while twist villains would later become a common trend in 2010's Disney animated films, I do think that Commander Rook is a great example of this archetype done right. He spends the whole film doing a fantastic job of leading Milo on, because he's not exactly pretending to be someone he's not, but rather naturally doing his job as a military leader while disguising his real intentions under a desire to excavate. A motive you might expect from someone in his job. Like, he doesn't have to change how he behaves much or put on a silly liar's act, because a professional commander is expected to be quite hard-nosed, a little short-tempered and strict. His evil plans are kept discreet to the audience because he doesn't make them obviously blatant, but we do also gradually notice something a little off about him.
Commander, there were not supposed to be people down here. It changes everything.
This changes nothing.
So when his true intentions are revealed, they're not out of left field or a twist for the sake of a twist. He's also very charming in a deceptive and manipulative way, being quite the smooth talker and someone who knows how to appear friendly to cautious natives.
May I say it is an honor to be welcomed to your city.
Excuse me, Commander?
You presume much to think you are welcome here.
Sir, we have come a long way looking for...
I know what you seek, and you will not find it here. Your journey has been in vain.
But we are peaceful explorers, men of science.
Not to mention, once Milo starts challenging Rourke's conscience, he never seems shaken. No matter what you say to try and guilt him for his actions, he retains a calm demeanor and smug arrogance. You can tell he's managed to convince himself that he's entitled to do what he's doing, and it's this confidence that I find scary, because you can't reason with him or make him look foolish.
Don't do this.
Academics never want to get your hands dirty. Think about it. If you gave back every stolen artifact from a museum, you'd be left with an empty building. We're just providing a necessary service to the archaeological community.
While I can praise many aspects of Rourke and will say he's definitely very well written, he is not exactly a villain that immediately comes to mind when you bring up Disney's Rogues Gallery. I think this is maybe because Atlantis the Lost Empire is better known for its fantasy elements, rich world building and cartoony supporting characters. So I guess that's why Rourke doesn't really leave a lasting impression compared to other Disney villains. He becomes overshadowed by his own movie's more colourful aspects. A tier. John Silver is the ship cook for the quest to find Treasure Planet, working closely with hero and cabin boy Jim Hawkins. But it later turns out that he's really a crooked pirate, and the crew on board are actually his loyal mates. Much like Commander Rourke, Silver does a good job at hiding his real intentions, especially more than his crew. He slides comfortably into the role of chef because he's a talented cook and seems to love being on a ship regardless of his role. His cybernetic body parts also make him unique because each attachment has a mechanical purpose and a threatening steampunk design, giving a fun sci-fi twist to his original book counterpart. Couple this imaginative aesthetic with a charming magnetism and cheeky sense of humour, then you have one hell of an appealing villain.
Ah, 'tis a grand day for sailing, Captain. And look at you. You're as trim and as bonny as a sloop with new sails and a fresh coat of paint.
Silver may have the generic goal of wanting money, but the movie makes fantastic use out of this motive, by using his obsession with the treasure to add depth to his character. You see, Silver becomes quite attached to Jim Hawkins, resembling a father figure for the teenage boy with abandonment issues. This pirate captain takes a liking to the boy and genuinely enjoys teaching him responsibilities.
Now, you listen to me, James Hawkins.
You got the makings of greatness in you, but you gotta take the helm and charge your own course. Stick to it, no matter the squalls. And when the time comes, you get the chance to really test the cut of your sails and show what you're made of. Well, I hope I'm there.
but it's his greed for the treasure that stops him from fully embracing his parental role, because it's driven him to a life of crime and distracted him from his potential to do good. You can tell that he loves Jim, but his madness for gold creates an obstacle between the two, and he has to ask himself which is more important to him, helping Jim reach his dream or finding the treasure he's dedicated his whole life to. Unlike most other Disney villains, there's some humanity and sympathy to John Silver. He has a sensitive conscience and a repressed desire to show love, and this is what makes him surprisingly likable for a baddie. He could have become the hero of this film's story because there's a good soul behind his crooked nature, but he's too deep in the pirate world to even contemplate that option. He really is one of the more emotionally complex Disney villains. S tier. Slim is a criminal who is using his yodeling skills to hypnotize cows into following him so that he can bankrupt all the farms of the land and buy them himself once they go on auction, using the money he makes from the cows he sells. Now, I'll be the first to admit that Alameda Slim is far from a great villain. It's like he's a bunch of cliche Western antagonists squashed together. The outlaw wanted by the sheriff, and the wealthy crook who is trying to buy the hero's home. The motive behind what he's doing is kind of weak and half-explained too. You see, he wants to own as many farms as he can and get revenge on the farmers for not appreciating his yodeling. It's kind of unimaginative and not exactly an interesting incentive for a Disney animated villain to have. He also chose the worst henchmen possible, the Willy brothers, who are stupid for the sake of being stupid. They're incompetent and slow-witted, but without the charm and appeal of Kronk, all three being more annoying than funny.
I'd say these are the last of Big Mike Donald's herd.
Big MacDonald had a farm? E-I-E-I!
Not to mention his disguise for his auction appearances seems kind of uninspired. I'm surprised no one saw through it right away, especially when he lifts his glasses to read. Yeah, it's cartoon logic, but when the success of your villain's crime is based on his undercover abilities, it's not exactly a good look when it's hard to buy. However, it would be harsh of me to ignore some aspects of him that are good. Like, this is a villain who uses yodeling as a weapon. Yodeling! While accompanying himself with a guitar. It's silly for sure, but man is it different and out there. Alameda's relationship with the cows is tied together well too. Not only are the cows victims of Alameda's evil plans, but his yodeling only affects bovines. Alameda's eventual capture is also what will help the cows save their farm, because the reward money matches the costs. All these details help make the rivalry between the cows and Alameda very personal. Not to mention, while the Willy brothers are crappy henchmen, Alameda is at least smart enough to hire a bounty hunter to moonlight for him, so I'll give credit where it's due. D tier. Bowler Hat Guy is a devious villain who tries to travel through time to ruin the future of an orphan boy called Louis, who is destined to become the greatest inventor of all time. Why? Because it turns out that this crook used to be Louis's roommate at his orphanage, Goob, who was kept awake all night by the boy scientist's invention building, and his tiredness caused him to end up losing his baseball game. I think the Bowler Hat Guy is the most underrated Disney animated villain ever, and I'm not even kidding. Sure, he's incredibly incompetent and often needs the help of his robotic cat Doris to know what to do. But guess what? That's the point. He's meant to be a comedic villain, and he's stomach-bustingly hilarious. Every scene he's in is consistently funny, with all the humor coming from how rubbish he is as a criminal mastermind.
Did you not hear what I said, you idiot? Grab the boy and bring him!
Well, it's just that there's a million people over there, and I have little arms. I'm just not so sure how well this plan was thought through. Master?
It's one thing to have a crappy villain, but it takes extra effort and skill to make them entertaining because they suck at what they do. If Bowler Hat Guy wasn't funny, we'd find him obnoxious for being a terrible villain, but he is the most hilarious part of the movie.
Ah, look right here, look what I found! It's a stick! Now what did you find? Yes, I see. Time travel residue next to DNA from Wilbur Robinson. That, plus my stick, must mean...
The fact he remains passionate and enthusiastic throughout, in spite of how often things don't go to plan, is what makes him so lovably endearing. He's just so into this revenge scheme. He's having so much fun being the bad guy that a part of us kind of roots for him, even though he's trying to ruin an orphan's life. Much like John Silver, there's a sympathetic side to him too. He's a misguided individual who has ended up channeling his resentment towards Lewis into a life of crime. And he only trusts Doris because he's become socially distant from humans. There's something tragic about his life that's both pathetic and sad. Instead of growing as a person, he let his one failure consume him, which neatly ties into the movie's theme of overcoming mistakes. Once Bowler Hat Guy finds out that Doris was using him to take over the world with her legion of hatbots, he seems genuinely hurt that his only friend tricked him and admits that he never intended to create any kind of dystopia. After defeating Doris, Bowler Hat Guy becomes lost and confused as a character. As goofy as he can be, Bowler Hat Guy is one of the more relatable Disney animated villains, because we can totally resonate with a character who's trying to define himself after experiencing the pain of failure, betrayal, and wrong choices. S tier. Like I said, Doris ends up being the brains behind the operation, a robot bowler hat who wants to stop Lewis's invention career from taking off, so that she can gain immense power over the world. But here's the thing. She's an invention that Lewis will end up creating. She can't exist without his career, which means she's sabotaging her own scheme. So the change that she creates in the future shouldn't really be happening. Yeah, I'll admit that one of the major flaws of this movie is its time travel logic, unfortunately. Putting aside that head scratcher though, Doris is still a great character. She complements Bowler Hat Guy by compensating for his lack of menace, being the real evil genius and giving the film a darker side. I think that the biggest strength of a character though is her visual design. She has no dialogue or facial expressions, yet her animation is vivid enough to convey a strong personality. In an amazing feat, Disney managed to make a bowler hat seem intimidating and slightly scary. A tier. Dr. Facilier, the Shadow Man, is a con artist with a collection of tricks and spells under his sleeves. This magician convinces a prince called Naveen into agreeing to being turned into a frog, so that he can use Naveen's blood to transform the prince's manservant Lawrence into his majesty, in a scheme to marry into the wealthy LaBeouf family through Lawrence's disguise. Facilier has close bonds with dark voodoo forces, which gives him certain advantages, but his best talent is his ability to charm people. His snazzy clothes, flamboyant personality, and slick confidence help him to get his way, even when he needs to win over his friends on the other side.
I'll have the entire city of New Orleans in the palm of my hand. And you'll have all the wayward souls your dark little hearts desire. You'll love that, don't you?
One thing that really makes him stand out is how his shadow has a personality of its own. It loves to taunt or mock people, including Facilier. The creativity behind the shadow is truly impressive. Another thing I love about him is how mysterious he is. He seems to have this sinister history, but the movie won't let us know what it is. For example, he can't perform voodoo spells on himself, and it's never explained why, but it's that vagueness that disturbs me. What did he do in the past that resulted in voodoo magic becoming useless on him, and what else is he willing to do? I find that ambiguity awesomely creepy. However, as cool as Dr. Facilier is, when I analyse him as the antagonist in the film's story, I can't help but notice that he's a very flawed villain with a flimsy plan. Firstly, Facilier doesn't have a one-on-one relationship with the movie's main character, Tiana, being far more associated with the supporting character of Naveen. She's not his primary target in his plans, but rather someone who accidentally gets caught up in his scheme. Sure, they get to meet face to face when Facilier tests Tiana's conscience in the finale, which plays an important part in her character arc, so things do get personal in the climax, but they're still strangers to each other in this scene, and they lack the intimate rivalry needed for a solid hero and villain dynamic. Heck, he spends most of the movie in hiding, separated from the frog's adventure and leaving his minions to do most of the work. Secondly, Facilier's efforts as a villain aren't very strong. The methods behind his plan seem to be more tailored to giving the heroes a fighting chance than securing the efforts for his villain scheme to work. From how the curse can only be broken by a royal kiss, which is quite convenient when a princess is going to be parading in the city before the deadline, a goal that's only made harder for our heroes because they're blown away to the bayou, which Facilier had nothing to do with at all, to the fact that he keeps Naveen in a glass jar that's being supervised by the bumbling Lawrence. This glass jar was an accident waiting to happen, and just not the best prison for a character that's integral to Facilier's scheme.
No wonder Smithers made me head B guy.
It's getting away.
Oh, we did bad. You'd think that someone like Facilier would use dark magic to imprison Naveen in something more secure. Something that would be really hard for the prince to escape from. He would have to use his wits. I think the curse could have been improved if there was an antidote in Dr. Facilier's suit, or perhaps a special voodoo item locked away in Dr. Facilier's hideout. Just something that would show that the Shadow Man thought hard about his contingencies and defenses when coming up with his evil plan. B tier. So those are my rankings for the 2000s Disney animated villains. Which are yours? Let me know in the comments section below. I've been Jambareeqi and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then feel free to like, share and subscribe. Cheerio folks!